All right, we are live. Okay, now we're live. Hello, everyone. Had some technical issues again, but I'm going to be bringing on a friend, another fellow web developer who actually helped me mentor a lot of people in Chicago, a lot of aspiring developers in Chicago. Started off as a software engineer in test. So of course, if you have any testing questions, this is the stream to ask them. But let me make sure everything is good, and then we're gonna hop in Zoom. But yeah, I think everything is cool. All right, let's hop in Zoom. Start. And I think I should have this set up as well. I hope so.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Thank you. Probably don't need to
Recording stopped.
Okay. Thank you, Zoom. All right. Start video. Hello, Ben.
Hello.
How is it going?
It's going well. And enjoying the Wednesday. How are you?
It's a good week so far. It's a really good week so far. I'm a little tired. I keep staying up trying to work and do a little bit more. But yeah, I guess, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I can. My name is Ben. I was, words. I'm blanking on them right now. Yeah, but my name is Ben. I'm a software engineer in the Chicagoland area. Don and I had worked together doing the Chicago Web Dev Mentorship a while back, and I always enjoy coming on these talks because Don reaches a lot of people and helps a lot of people, so it's nice to be a part of that. But in terms of my history as a developer, I started out going to a bootcamp. I went to Full Stack Academy about 3 years back, I want to say. From there, I had gone to and then graduated from that into my current role at Screencastify, where I work as a software engineer there, working on this essentially web app that allows you to take videos, edit videos, and then export edited videos to save them locally. So we try to take that big video editing experience, simplify it down to something that anyone could understand, anyone could work with, and fitting it into the web, which is causes us to run up against a lot of weird problems because, web wasn't made to export videos, but we do it anyways. So yeah, super fun. In addition to that, I also teach part-time at Full Stack Academy. I run their the university software engineering immersive part-time program for a couple of their university partnerships. So if anyone has questions about that specifically, I'm happy to oblige. But yeah,
love it.
Is my history.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming on. I talk all the time. People get my opinions all the time, so I figured I'd get a second opinion. I think we did a live Q&A, a few months ago. People like what you had to say.
It's good. I like what they had to ask, so works out.
Happy Wednesday to you as well, Richard, Jeremy, Code. Welcome. So feel free to ask us questions. I have a few that I kind of have I've lined up that sometimes I get questions and comments that just are going to take too long to type out. So I do have some of those. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, anything that's getting you stuck with web development in your journey, anything like that. And by the way, I know Jeremy, I do see you. We for those that really enjoyed the self-taught video with everyone, it's my most popular self-taught video, which it blew me away that it became that. We're going to be bringing them back on very shortly. That episode is going to be coming out very soon. So with that said, yeah, I'm ready to jump right in. So just to clarify, you're still instructor at Full Stack Academy. That's what you said, right?
Yeah. I'm doing their part-time program for a handful of their universities right now. So
okay.
One cohort's an augmentation of a bunch.
That's fun. Like I said, I honestly wish, I don't know, it's really tough. I almost wish I would have interviewed for Full Stack Academy instead of my third position, because I would have loved. Instructor? Yeah, as an instructor, exactly. I was talking to Ben about it. Yeah, I just my company had a really good offer, which I learned money isn't everything down the road, but that's okay. I had to learn that lesson. We are good. I appreciate everyone joining us. So again, if you have any questions, ask them in chat. Ben's a really intelligent software engineer. And like I said, I go to him with a lot of my testing questions as well. Hey, Kushi. Hey, Mohammed. All right. So I posted a poll. I want to show you this. Let me send this to you. Posted a poll last night. Let's go community tab. And the poll is... How do I share this? Oh, yeah, it's weird. To share a comment on YouTube, you have to click the share. Oh, no, you have to click the comment button. Then it creates a unique URL. So I'm going to send this on Slack. Look at this poll. This is what people think. So I asked a question, essentially, should you learn testing? Should you have tests in all of your portfolio projects? Should you have tests in just a few portfolio projects? Or is that something you learn on the job? That's what people thought. What's your opinion on it?
Yeah. That's a very good question. A lot of the times, so you can sort of approach it from two different points of view. On one hand, testing is not a necessity, right? You don't need to test your code in order to create new projects, and new projects are something good for your resume. The nice thing about testing, though, is one, it's ultimately testing is a sort of defensive sport, and it will save you a lot of time in the long run if you do it right. Just pseudocode.
Uh-oh. You're lagging. You're lagging. Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. So in terms of the nice thing about writing tests is that on one hand, it acts as like this form of pseudocode where you can write out the intentions behind what you want to accomplish and what it is you're trying to do before actually going and trying to tackle that problem. So doing test-driven development is nice for both creating that visual vocabulary of what code am I looking at and what does that associate itself with, or like what plain English problems does this code solve, while also sort of giving you protections along the way. The other nice thing about testing, if you do it before you end up landing your first job, is a lot of companies actually don't have the test suites that they're super proud of right off the gate. Because while you in an isolated environment might be able to just churn out a project, companies are beholden by a lot of deadlines, and they have a lot of shareholders that they have to respond to, or they have higher powers that are dictating when they can work on their code and how much effort they can put into it. Which means one of the things that ends up falling through in the long run is the stuff that doesn't end up churning out into a feature. So testing ends up being one of those things, one of those corners that people tend to cut, which is to say that if you're the developer who knows how to write tests, and you can come into a company or you can go into an interview saying, hey, I like tests, I know how to write tests. That's generally a very big plus on your resume for two reasons. One, every employer is looking for that magical developer who's going to come into their company, champion the idea of like saving time and having this sort of efficiency. So, people like seeing that you're someone who does that. And two, one really nice approach to onboarding is sometimes you can just get into the repo and start writing tests, because that gives you a good excuse to look at old code while still providing value to the company. So it sort of gives you this strategy of, hey, when you hire me on, I have this like useful skill where I'm not going to be just sitting there doing nothing for the first couple of weeks. I have something I can do and something that's ultimately that you can take away from having me.
That's a really interesting second point that you just mentioned. It really can help, might be intimidating, but if you are very confident and you've written a lot of tests in the past, I mean, writing tests really does help you thoroughly understand what everything's doing. Yeah, that's good advice. I like that. Nice to have.
it's I think the thing that really changed testing for me was I used to think of it as just like sort of a check mark, to like a box to check off when considering like, hey, is my code clean code? Is my code good code? But the thing that really turned it for me was thinking about it as a form of documentation. When you're writing tests, you're not just writing things that are going to protect you down the line and they're going to stop you from doing anything. You're writing documentation that people don't have to read. Like if someone comes back and changes your function, like say you're writing a function to add 5 to something, and the reason you're adding 5 to something is so you know that you always have 5 more apples than you have bananas in stock at your grocery store. If someone ever comes in and goes, hey, I'm gonna increase the number of bananas, and I'm gonna break this sort of conception that you had of a code and what needs to be true about the code in order for it to work, then they'll automatically break that test and they'll be able to know, oh, this weird thing that I added over here is actually not a good assumption to make. This assumption I made about the code is wrong, and the documentation that you wrote via writing testing is actively stopping someone from doing something that would have broken your code. So it's not just stopping yourself from running into bugs, but it's also a way of communicating the intention behind what you're writing and why exactly you need it. That's fun stuff.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's why I go to you for my testing questions. I'm serious. Like you really have a thorough understanding, quite frankly, of whether tests are needed in certain code bases, what parts they're needed. Like you're not a developer, and there are many developers like this. You're not a developer that just writes tests to check off those boxes anymore, right? You've developed this entirely different philosophy around testing that I think a lot of software engineers probably should adapt. I mean, like I've worked on teams where like we were writing unit tests that were kind of irrelevant, and they were a huge time sink. And it felt like even just talking to the other developers, they were just frustrated that their feature wasn't getting pushed out, and they had like a minimum number of tests they needed to write, and like so a lot of effort didn't go into writing well thought out tests to document the code well and to make sure the right parts, quite frankly, the more complicated and complex parts were being tested in our code base. But yeah, I don't know. That was good advice. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. It's one of those things that comes with experience. As you deal with larger code bases and as you deal with things with more moving parts, is sort of part of growing as a developer is realizing, hey, it's not just about solving the problem; it's about solving it in the right way, and showing people who know that shows that you're growing.
I like that. You mind if I toss you just kind of a few questions and we'll bounce around a bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. All right. So I might bounce around. I might go to some of the more recent questions than previous questions, but where was it? How deep should a junior developer get into testing? It's kind of a vague question, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you can sort of approach it from 2 different directions. One thing I always like to tell junior developers when they're first starting out is find a project that interests you. Find something that really calls to you and something that really resonates with you. Which is to say, if you're writing tests and you find out something that you do want to get deeper into, there's definitely a market for it. There are just a lot of people looking for testers, and testers aren't, there aren't a lot of people who have experience exclusively in writing tests and setting up automated test suites. So that's always good to have. On the other hand, if testing is something that you just sort of want to add to your resume, or wherever you have other interests and you're more interested in diving deeper into those, but I'd say it's less about how deep you get into testing. It's more about just building up the habit of writing tests. Because once you have that muscle memory of test-driven development, once you have that muscle memory of like writing out tests for a problem before actually solving the problem itself, or rather, once you get into the habit of writing tests to support the code that you've already written, that's going to naturally build on itself. You're going to find that as you write more tests and as you try to make more complex tests that, like, say, test different React components or test more dynamic pieces of your application, you're naturally going to end up learning more about testing. Or I guess another way to phrase that is it's not sort of this isolated sphere. A lot of it will end up building on top of itself. And a lot of complexities you'll run into won't be specific to testing, but will be more specific to code architecture and how you're working with your code. So you can get super deep into testing if that's something that interests you. There's a lot of directions you can take, but also becoming a better tester isn't always about just learning testing. Sometimes it's just becoming a better programmer in general.
Damn.
How do you feel about that? Does that resonate with what you see, man?
It does resonate with me a lot. I'm trying to think, like, my very first position, I guess it was different than yours, because yours was a software engineer in tests. That's what you focused on. I don't think I wrote any tests as a junior developer. In fact, I remember my supervisor, I'm trying to think back. I remember my supervisor, he would write a lot of the automated tests, and he didn't push that on me. I probably should have asked why that is. But I remember, I don't think I wrote my first automated test until maybe 6 months in, and it felt like it was just an instruction to do it, but I never really understood why. It felt like it honestly felt like a box to check off, and I never truly understood why. And I feel like if you want to convince a lot of your team, or like teach them good practices initially, like you have to I mean, even just like tell them stories about like all the bugs that would pop up before your automated test. But I feel like a lot of junior developers go into it and they're like, okay, I just got to write tests, and then they do it and they go through the motions. And I wonder if they're actually learning good habits behind it, or if they're just building up resentment for it because it's a chore that prevents them from getting out their feature.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really nice there, because there's sort of this weird difference between writing tests and just like churning out tests, where if you write like 70 tests inside of your code and each one of them is just checking to see if a function is a function, that's not really testing anything. It's just testing if JavaScript is doing what it's doing, right? And like a lot of times people fall into that habit of, hey, I'm just going to focus on how many specs I can get out, and if this number is really big, then I'm going to be really happy. I think that's another thing that like thinking about it as documentation is going to help solve, because if you're thinking about it as like, I want to write this test so no one ever calls this function with the word banana passed into it when banana isn't like a supported fruit for us, then maybe that has more value, because it's less that you're just writing code to write code, and it's more just you're writing something with purpose, which is, it's a very awkward distinction to communicate, but does what I'm getting at there feel like it makes sense?
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. Yeah, again, that's really good advice. What do you think about, so I brought up this idea, well, actually, Ludo, someone else in my podcast episode brought up the idea that maybe consider a QA position that would transfer into software engineering. So I'm going to explain my opinions about this. I definitely, okay. With coding bootcamps, I remember there was a particular coding bootcamp where essentially they had the ISA model, and a lot of people signed up for the ISA. And what ended up happening was they pushed a lot of people. I think it was like, depends on the campus, but it was like sometimes up to 20% of people, I think. That's all right. I'm not saying the name of it, so I'm not worried about the specifics. But into QA positions, right? They came into the coding bootcamp trying to become a software engineer. And they said, hey, go to this QA position. Eventually it'll lead to a software engineering role. And my problem with that was it triggered the ISA, and it triggered the payments that they had to pay. They went into software engineering. They weren't able to find a coding job. And so the coding bootcamp said, hey, try QA. We see that a lot of people have transferred from QA to software engineering. We have a partnership with this company, et cetera. And then I would look at these software engineers that gave that a shot. They're still QA a year later, right? And so I developed this mindset that I think like it's very easy to get trapped in a position and get sold a false promise that it's going to transfer into a software engineering position. And I've had people share their stories of just like, I've gotten trapped. I was told QA kind of was I used it as a stepping stone. Didn't give me that position. But I also, from Ludo, he kind of mentioned like this idea that if you go into QA, let's say they have like no automated tests whatsoever, and you are the QA that doesn't just do manual testing. You start building out like tons of automated tests to essentially like automate a lot of your work, and you can become more efficient, test code faster. Obviously the ramp up time, it would take a little bit for QA to be able to learn something like that. You have to learn programming. But what I'm saying is, do you feel like you could leverage a QA position into a software engineering position, or more often than not, do you usually see QA positions kind of just, or people in QA positions stay as QA?
Yeah, this is a this is a fun question for me, because my journey at Jellyvision was so after graduating from full stack, I went to Jellyvision. I interviewed right out of gate, and it went well. I fortunately connected with a lot of people during the interview, but unfortunately I didn't get it the first time I interviewed there. But what had happened was I'd reached out to a couple of people beforehand to say, hey, like, I know the interview didn't go well, but let's have a coffee chat so we can talk about what is what it's like working at Jellyvision, stuff like that. And I fortunately met one of my favorite mentors that I've had throughout my career, who's helped me get into Jellyvision eventually. But the way that I got my foot in the door at Jellyvision was I picked up a seasonal role there as a QA analyst to sort of do part-time while still looking for work. And what my experience was there, trying to transition from QA into a developer role, was I had looked for opportunities to insert myself into the development process. So for instance, what I'd walked into there was they were in the process of taking a lot of their Ruby code, which was what all of our tests were working with before, Ruby and Selenium, and trying to figure out a way to convert it to JavaScript, because eventually they wanted a lower barrier of entry for their front-end developers to add new tests and to integrate end-to-end testing into their workflow. Which is to say that, I found the people who were tackling that automation. I connected with them and said, hey, I have a little bit of insight into here from my time at full stack. Maybe I can help out. Maybe I can do something or help you out a bit here. Which is to say that my situation was a little unique, since it was a seasonal role. It had an end date, which meant that, they knew they were going to lose me at some point. So the choice to hire me on was, hey, either he goes, finds a job somewhere else, or he finds a position here. So there was a very low chance of me getting stuck in the role of QA, which was fortunate, but also I sort of found my way into the role by inserting myself into situations where I got to use my skills as a developer and demonstrate my value as a developer. The reason why I wanted to highlight that story and highlight those distinctions is because I was able to transition from QA to a development role. But the reason I was able to do that was because I sort of demonstrated my value along the way, and I didn't do it as a QA analyst. I did it as like, hey, here's something I'm going to just like do as me, or here's like something I'm going to help you out with. And once my role ends, then fortunately they were able to figure something out. If I were a full-time analyst trying to make that same transition, I think that the water may have been a little grayer, or it may have been a little bit murkier, because of the fact that like they already have me hired on as a QA analyst. By picking on this extra work, I'm kind of just sort of making my job as a QA analyst to do my QA stuff and to do this extra work, right? So I guess the point I'm getting at there is I think it's very possible. The skill set you build up as QA is very, very similar to the skills you need to become a developer. Because in the process of debugging code, in the process of familiarizing yourself with that application, not only are you building product knowledge, but you're also building up that sort of language that you need to pseudocode, or language that you need to properly envision what it means to have a feature go from beginning to end. The thing you really need to look out for is you need to be ready to fight for yourself. You need to be ready to say, hey, these responsibilities that I'm able to take on and the value that I'm providing for you as a company don't fall under the realm of QA, they fall under the realm of engineer, which is why I want to make that transition. So I think that's the part of the conversation that I have trouble racking my mind around exactly how that'd go. That's normally something I'd reach out for vision into, Don. How do you think it'd be handling that conversation of, hey, I'm a QA analyst, but I'm currently doing engineering stuff as well, and wanting to move over without burning that bridge per se.
Yeah, and that's difficult because essentially, you just said it at the end, you don't want to burn that bridge. Especially like with a full-time position, they're hiring you for QA, and there's a ramp-up time for QA in general. There's a lot to learn. I can genuinely say that I had tons of respect for QA and truly understanding every piece of the app, because in every developer position, I feel like I was always learning something new about the application. And a lot of these applications are very complex. So like just the memory alone and just remembering everything about that app was incredibly impressive. Now, if it's full time, if they're investing time into training you, I feel like it is going to be a little bit harder to make that transition, because I think you can make I think you can have a very in-depth career in just QA in general. It's definitely its own career path. Now I think you kind of mentioned it pretty well. You're going to have all of your responsibilities. You need to make sure that you take care of all those responsibilities. I think where I can see people making it work is, putting in additional hours past that 40 hours. It's taking charge. It's taking charge of kind of just like showing that your interest in it, learning a little programming, learning even kind of just like when you are in different stand-ups and just like trying to pick up the dev cycle in general, try to listen to developers and how they go about their work. But, so you could pick up some good habits that other developers have, but it's putting in extra hours to potentially dive into the code. I just don't think that a lot of companies are going to be willing to let you do that during hours. And I think people had this dreamy vision of, well, like if I really impress them, if I really start building out a lot of this automation, even though they didn't ask for it during company hours, I guess it depends on your workload. Like it really depends on the company, but I think you're going to have to put in a lot of extra hours. And I think you can. And I think you described the path to do that very, very well. I don't disagree with any of that at all. I just want to make sure that QA truly understands like it's probably going to take a lot of extra effort and time to be able to do that. But on the flip side, right, as a developer, you can spend 40 hours a week and dive into your code and kind of like get locked in this point where like this often happens like a year into it. Like you kind of understand your part of the code base, and sometimes you get locked into that part of the code base. You understand it really well. You're not challenged. Right. And I think when people hit that barrier of it's not really challenging anymore and you're just kind of going with the flow, as a developer, you kind of have to spend some time with personal projects or like really take charge and put in extra hours to like pick up other parts of the code base or own other aspects, even if it is like you're championing or the like testing role, like your company doesn't really write a lot of tests and you decide to do that, something a little extra. So I just expect to put in more hours. I think it's very realistic and doable. The problem is a lot of QA engineers that go in, sometimes they have families, sometimes they have other responsibilities, and I see them often getting overwhelmed, and probably maybe don't do it like within the first 3 months. Like really give yourself time to understand your position. And I think people try to jump into a QA role and they're already thinking, oh, how do I get to that developer position? So I think it's also pacing yourself. But as long as you do that and you take those things into consideration, I think it's very realistic. Yeah.
Another thing to mention that you touched on early on and then again at the end there is that time is a big consideration, but you don't have to feel rushed to do it right out the gate. Because even though QA is a different position than development, you're still building up a very valuable skill. And potentially like the most valuable skill you can have that's unique to the company is by doing QA, by filling the role of analyst, you're building up product knowledge. You're building up a very unique form of product knowledge, both in how to navigate the product and how to use the product, that no one else is going to have unless they've fulfilled like a similar role, or no one's going to have like as intimate a connection with. So when the opportunity comes up, when the opportunity to apply to be a developer comes up, or when the opportunity to transition comes up, they do have a big motivation to turn you into a developer, because a developer who has a very intimate knowledge of like how the product works, along with what the ins and outs of the product are, is going to have a much easier time both quickly creating features and also effectively grooming features to help, you know, work your way around potential issues, or just to give you the foresight of what's going to happen if I add this in. What moving parts connect to this login button that I'm clicking right now. So just because you're doing QA doesn't mean you're not building up the skill that they'd value.
I like that. Yeah, a good chunk of my ramp up time is usually spent towards truly understanding the product. Definitely makes for a better developer. Jeremy mentioned, it's a good point that moving from QA to dev, expecting a transition in a year is unlikely. Most folks I have seen do it have put in roughly 2 to 3 years as QA at a company before moving. And I think that's pretty realistic. And welcome everyone. I am reading your messages, by the way. I'm scrolling through, but and if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to let us know. Ben, obviously, if you haven't seen already, is a very, very bright developer. And there was a question above, but yeah, I'm trying to like balance reading questions and listening to you, but I think you have really good insight on this topic. And that was, I've actually had my position on this changed. And I like, again, where I was coming from was, it felt like some coding boot camps were kind of just like triggering the ISAs. They didn't want to offer that refund because people were taking a long time to get a developer position. Oh, by the way, we have a QA position. But I think that tainted it tainted my ability to like really look at that in depth and analyze some of those career transitions that actually did happen as well.
No, I think that's really good to bring up, because that's another like part of my experience that didn't exist, right? I didn't have an ISA when I went into it. I'd gone for a different plan, so that wasn't something I'd had to worry about. If it was, then I'd be a little more suspicious about where that advice was coming from. But yeah,
definitely.
The other thing that's scary about just graduating from bootcamp is like that first job is really valuable once you do find it. It's much easier to get the second job. So like anything that promises helping get that first job is immediately attractive.
Yeah. Once you have about a year in, you doors just open up completely for you.
Yeah.
Where was the question? Oh, how would you prepare for a front end dev interview?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first thing I'd do is I'd look into the company, figure out what kind of company is this. Generally, larger companies tend to be much more aggressive about algorithmic problems, because of the idea that, a lot of times algorithmic problems rely on very tiny optimizations. So if it's a company that would benefit from those types of optimizations, such as like large company like one of the FANG companies, or like a fintech company that deals with a ton of data analysis and a bunch of data coming in at any point in time, that might be higher valued. But ultimately, I'd say the best way to prepare for an upcoming role is look at the technologies that they list on their resume. And my favorite little thing to sneak into interviews is pick a couple of technologies that you don't know on there and just set up some basic repos with those technologies in place. So for example, if they mention on their resume that like Docker is something that they use, and that's not something that you've ever used before, it might be worth just doing like a quick exploration of how to set up a Docker environment and how to work through that, so you can show, hey, like I don't know what this is, but I saw you guys value it, and I know how to onboard myself into it. I know how to take the initiative and pick this up. So it's a little sneaky thing you can do.
Do you think it's often worth the time to do that with a lot of companies?
It depends on like how much you care about the company. If you're applying for 70 jobs, don't do it 70 times unless you have the time to. But if it's a company that's like near the top of your list and you have a feeling that it's going to be like a big plus on your resume, then you might as well. The other nice thing about it is once you explore technology one time, you've explored that technology. You've added it to your list of things that you can speak to in like some context, right? So it's not essentially wasted time. Even though you're doing it for one interview, it's something that'll cross over into, it's knowledge that'll cross over in other interviews as well. So yeah, familiarizing yourself with the ins and outs of different things is nice. General project work is always good. If you can find a tiny project to work on, or just find something to pour time into to make yourself a better developer, it's always good to do. Yeah, I feel like those are some pretty general answers. Feels like a bit of a cop-out to just say like, do anything that they have on their application. But
well, I think you nailed it, right? If you really care about the company, you're always going to have like the top 3, top 5 companies like you're really trying for. And I think you should spend that additional time to do that. I 100% agree. I think some people had this misconception that like when they hear that advice, they think, why, I have a family, I don't have the time to do that for a bunch of different companies and et cetera. It's like, well, you have time to apply to 600 positions as well. You have to keep that in mind. It's like that could be time consuming, and like you just spreading out all those applications to all those companies, and many times you're probably not even including a cover letter. That's still a time sink, and it's like you're not really doing much to bring attention to you among hundreds of other junior developer applicants, at each position. So it's where should you invest the time? And sometimes that is a strategy. Sometimes it's just like, I actually, like the first position I got, I didn't submit a cover letter, but and I kind of was just going through as quickly as I possibly could. I was tired. I'm like, I'm so sick of like filling out these applications. And but they had this specific, they had all these extra questions. I was really annoyed at it. I'm like, man, this is taking like 20 minutes to get through all this. But they had all these extra questions that kind of forced me to like really explain my process, my passion for development, and like why I was even interested in the company, etc. And I'm glad they forced me to do that, because I know it's easy to get into that mindset. It's just like, I've applied for so many positions, like, fuck it, we're just doing LinkedIn applications, no cover letter, like I'm just pressing a button, that's it, I'm done, right? I get that mindset, and because I had that mindset, I was so tired of it. But the companies that did call me back were the ones that I put effort in. It's just the truth, right? They were ones that like I did submit a cover letter to, or like their application process dug a lot of information out of me. So it's not about like you don't have time. It's just like, how are you prioritizing your time? And especially with those top companies, I think that's a really good strategy. I hear that from a lot of hiring managers as well.
Yeah, and like on the flip side of that, you have to remember that when you're applying for a junior or like an entry level role as a developer, you're competing with like hundreds of different resumes most of the time. And a lot of times, if you get rejected, it's not because you're bad or because like you're lesser as a developer. It's usually just because they had 100 other people on the list, and they have people who are pouring time into looking at all these resumes. So at some point they just have to say, hey, we're going to look at the top 30. We're going to pick our favorite out of that. And then we're going to trust that we can onboard them on to become the developer that we want, or we can trust our interview process to filter out whether or not there's any good applicants in there. And if there's not, then move on to the next 10. So the challenge of getting those roles is, like you said, Don, distinguishing yourself beyond all those other 100 applicants, rising yourself to the top of the stack, or pulling yourself out of the stack. So it no longer becomes like a battle of chance of every time I submit my resume, am I going to be one of the lucky few who are picked? But it's more just like, hey, they know who I am. They have some idea of what I can do as a person, so they'll single me out. I like to recommend
Uh-oh, what happened to your mic?
To reach out to other developers.
Hello?
Coffee chats are very industry.
Hello? Oh.
No.
Okay, can you repeat that last one?
I can. I was playing with my AirPods, and I forgot that when you open the AirPod case, it connects.
Oh, okay. You're good.
Yeah, to dial it back a little bit, I think a good thing that I always like to recommend people do when starting out to separate themselves from the stack is reach out to other developers there. Try to set up coffee chats, try to create conversations, because a lot of times, people will be open to meeting with you and talking about that. And that's a good way of just saying, hey, this is who I am. This is like what I'm like to work with. And, you don't always have to go into it with the idea that I'm going to talk to you, you're going to give me a job, done. Or you don't have to always treat it as an interview. Sometimes it's just, you meet with them, you get what experience you can, you learn from them what you can, and eventually, hopefully, that connection leads to another connection, which gets you to roll if it doesn't get you to roll initially.
I like that. I really like that. Yeah, sorry, I did just see your message. I probably should have tossed a link out. We are live on YouTube, just YouTube though.
Cool.
Do you have that link? Do you have the chat open?
Yeah. But no,
okay.
I'm on there. I didn't know if we were live anywhere else, but.
Cool. All right. Just want to make sure. Okay. So maybe this question will ask or answer yours as well, Mohammed. But as a junior front-end dev, what do you think is more appealing to a company? A dev that has some testing knowledge or a dev that has some back-end knowledge? I'm guessing having both is ideal.
Yeah, I think having both is ideal. I think it also depends on the role and the stack that you're applying for. Because if it's a smaller shop or if it's purely JavaScript, I'd imagine that front-end knowledge, or not front-end knowledge, but testing knowledge might be more general in terms of you can come in and say, hey, this is stuff I know, or this is stuff I can do. Or I guess another part of that question is saying backend knowledge is like a very wide net to cast, right? There's a lot of different things you can mean by backend, but ultimately I'd say in general, as long as you're confident in your ability to use a program, then testing is probably the way to go, just because that's a separate skill that you're building up. While backend is very domain specific in terms of like, hey, if you know how to use, if you know Docker, then you know containerized environments, but you know specifically Docker. So that may or may not cross over into other things. Testing is more of a skill, or it's a mindset of how to approach code. Which is to say that a lot of the times what I've found is when people are hiring for entry-level positions, they care a lot less about what do you know right now, and they care a lot more about how capable are you of learning, and what do I feel like your work process is as a developer. Because a lot of companies are hiring in junior developers with the understanding that you're not going to be making all the same contributions that a more experienced developer is going to be making right out the gate. You're going to need some time to onboard, you're going to need some time to be trained, you're going to need some time to essentially get to that point where you can become that productive member. So when they're looking for junior developers, they're more looking for, hey, who can I eventually forge into that developer who I want leading my team, or who can I invest time into to create the type of developers that I want to work in my company. So in general, if you tackle testing, my thought would be that might lead you down a path where you can show people that, hey, I don't care about just solving code. I also care about writing this the right way, or I also care about documentation and things that aren't going to cost you money down the line.
I guess maybe there are two reasons why I think people need to learn backend as a front-end developer. One, I guess there are a few things, but one is just to spin up your application, right? But I want to really stress there are a lot of solutions out there where you don't need to learn backend to spin up your website. You can just work in the front end. I mean, if you're just diving into React, Create React app is a really cool application. Next.js is also another really cool application where you could spin things up really quickly and even get like server rendering with Next.js. But I think a lot of people just feel like their front-end projects aren't impressive. They feel like their front-end projects, quite frankly, it's going to provide a lot more complexity in most cases when you do have information to save and retrieve. And you could definitely, you can build up a very complex application that's usable. Like most of the websites that we use have some sort of login. It's not true for every website, for sure. But I think if you want that functionality, which is why a lot of front-end developers learn backend, I also want to stress you could pick up something like Firestore, an external database that you don't have to maintain, you don't have to spin up, you just have to connect to it, right? And so I really want to stress the idea that I love your focus on testing. I love your focus on, it's really going to help you focus on how you're writing your code and like even just diving into the architecture and showing that you care about documentation, you care about readability, and like just clearly explaining your code in several different ways, but like you care about the quality of your code. I feel like that's going to be way more important than trying to learn everything to show that you can learn everything. Because I think people kind of just want to put that as a skill in the resume. It's like, oh, and Node.js, right? And sure, maybe you even get some full stack. Maybe you potentially get this like rare full stack position as an entry level developer, which is really rare to begin with. But maybe you get it and you prove that you're able to like, ramp up in the time that they want you to ramp up in and learn their code base, front end and back end. But I feel like that's such a unicorn that I don't think it's worth your time. You shouldn't invest your time into that. I think focusing on testing and focusing on code quality and architecture and documentation, I think companies care about that a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing that's worth mentioning is the distinction between, it ultimately depends on the stack you run with, but the distinction between backend and front end can get very thin in terms of, at the end of the day, a lot of times it just boils down to where are you writing your code? Or like, can you double click on something to see if it's working, right? Which is to say that if you just focus on things that make you a better developer, that make you better at writing code in general, then you're still opening doors, or you're still keeping yourself open to becoming a backend developer, even though you're not diving specifically into it. You're just training a different skill. You're learning something that's different, but ultimately more generalized.
Yeah.
And I guess like another part of that is tests aren't just a front end thing. There's tests for the back end as well. So getting into that habit is going to benefit you on both sides of that field.
100%. It definitely will. Yeah. Really good advice again. I love it. This is an interesting one. I'm curious to hear what your opinion is on this. When getting your first job offer as a junior dev, are you in a position to negotiate, or should you snag up the first one you can get?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it depends on two primary things. One, how what do you envision your experience being worth? How much do you think you're worth? And does the offer that you got accurately represent what it is you're worth? Because if it's an incredible lowball that you feel is going to take up a lot of your time to the point where you're not even going to be open to like applying at other places or building your skills in a way that you could find that next job, it's probably worth pushing back, or worth negotiating to something that you feel is much closer to what you need. The other part of that is what do you need to live, right? Some people don't have the luxury of waiting however long they need to wait to get that perfect position. Sometimes you have to make that consideration of, if I accept this job right now at whatever salary they're going to give me, is the 2 months of salary that I'm going to have here going to be worth like the 2 months it would take me to find my ideal position? What I need to stay as a developer. So I'm just going to turn my Bluetooth off because it keeps.
Okay.
I haven't touched my microphone, but it still wants to connect me to it. But yeah.
Okay.
So it's a good balance between what's the offer look like? Is it reasonable? Is it something that I'd feel okay taking? And also, can I afford to turn it down? Can I afford to lose this opportunity? Because again, cost of living is something that exists, and also getting your first job is like I said, really nice. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot for the sake of taking your first job, but once you do get that first year of experience, the doors are going to blow open for you in general. Does that check out with what you've seen done?
Yeah, let me share a story in a second. I just want to answer this question. Arvin, when you say testing, what are you referring to? We're talking about like automated tests that you would write that checks that your code is actually working. So
the keywords to look up there would be unit testing or end-to-end testing are the two easiest ones I find to get into. I always recommend Cypress and Jest, Cypress being an end-to-end suite and Jest being a more general suite, usually React focused, if you're looking to getting into testing in JavaScript, if that helps. But, yeah.
Cool. Thank you. So I had someone in New York that I think he was in one of our live streams, not you and I's, but mine. It was a while back, and I remember him accepting a position that didn't pay his bills. It was his first developer position, and he accepted it. He went into it. He quit his previous job, and then he asked in the live chat, should I have done that? It's like, okay. So I think a lot of people, first of all, a lot of people are really poor financial planners, including me. I struggle with it. Like, I feel like high school underprepares us for that skill. That is my personal belief. And I feel like a lot of people, even when they go to coding boot camp or when they accept an offer, they don't really take the time out to like literally lay out every monthly expense. And I've met a lot of people like that, and that's the concern, right? That's the number one thing. It's like, if you are going to be accepting an offer, you have to know what your life costs, right? If you are asking the question, like I've heard the question, Don, should I pick up a second position? This developer position isn't paying the bills. It's like, you probably shouldn't have accepted that type of position. And there are a lot of other avenues and a lot of other solutions that you could do to kind of at least be able to pay the bills. But I feel like that offer, I think you really need to understand the bills that you're going to have to pay and your living expenses, and use that as a minimum salary that you're going to accept. And so that I would even bump that up past just like a minimum, like just paying just enough to get by with your bills, right? You should have a little bit to put into savings each month. And if you can do that with the salaries that they're offering, and you truly understand your financial situation, I think you might need to be a little bit more humble about getting that first position, right? As long as you can pay your bills and get a year's worth of experience, like I said, like Ben said, it opens up doors for you after that. And I feel like sometimes developers are too picky. So for example, in Chicago, I would argue somewhere between like the $70,000 and $80,000 range, maybe higher now with inflation. I'd probably have to look at those numbers, would be really good for an entry-level JavaScript position. And if they offer you $60,000, I can see people saying, no, I'm worth way more than that, and turning that down. And that's fine. You might go 8 more months without getting a position also. So the salary that that extra $10,000 or potentially $15,000 that you're giving up, what are your expenses over the next 8 months, right? And I think it really helps to be realistic about the oversaturation of this entry-level market. It is really tough to get a position. And I always tell people, you will eventually get that position as long as you don't give up, but you also need to really back yourself up financially for the long run for this. So I would hate to see someone turn away a $60,000 position in Chicago if it pays all their bills and they're putting a little bit into their savings. Get a year of experience, boost into a position that will pay you for what you're worth. I think I think developers should sometimes be a little bit more humble about that. But also you can also negotiate the first offer. You can, and you should. There's nothing wrong with that. Once that offer is on the table, they want you to join. They absolutely want you to join. And I think people are scared that they're going to withdraw the offer. Now, if you say, here's the problem. A lot of developers kick themselves in the foot by saying like, yeah, I'm willing to accept 60,000. Then they offer 60,000, right? They were willing to do more, but you gave that number out initially. So they offer 60,000. They're like, oh, you know what? I just read, I checked up average salaries. Actually, I should be getting the market rate. It's like, now you're being a little bit dishonest to the employer. Now you kind of like broke that trust. Like once you lay that number out there and then you're asking for more when they finally throw out that offer, it's not going to help your relationship with the employer. Now, that's why you should usually give a range. I always recommend people give a range. You can negotiate up within that range, depending on, like what responsibilities you finally discover you're going to be taking on. So I think people should be willing to accept that number. Yeah, I feel like that was just a rant, but those are kind of my thoughts on that.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, because another point you hit on there with your example of like a $60,000 job, would it be worth taking that or having like the 8 months before getting your next job? or your like next offer, another thing to consider there is you're missing out on 8 months of experience. So is it worth taking that job if you think you'll be able to get another job in another month? Maybe not. Maybe you'd rather just wait for the next offer if you're already close with a couple companies, or you're already confident that like you can have that conversation with a couple companies. If you think it's going to take a very long time to get that back, then that might also be a consideration, because like you said, Don, you're considering your runway. You're considering how much time can I afford to wait to look for that perfect job.
Exactly. And I hate to say sometimes ego gets in the way, but I think it does. I'm not going to say much past that, but I think some people, with software engineering in general, this is kind of the problem. It's like a lot of the advice that's thrown out, it's like everyone's looking just for the perfect happy path. They want someone to tell them exactly what to do, what to learn, what salary to negotiate for, etc. And I think all these skills are skills that you have to build up and kind of like teach yourself how to navigate on your own. And this is like, I've talked about this with tutorials, in depth, to where people's ears are just like, they're sick and tired of me hearing it. But with tutorials, it's like, eventually you have to stop letting tutorials tell you what to build. You got to kind of branch off and explore what you love to build and have fun with coding, get excited about it. And that's also true with interviews, negotiation, etc. You just have to be self-aware, and you need to self-assess how that interview went, what you could do better. And I think a lot of people just like want the best for themselves, which is good, but you have to understand you're going to make like a lot of mistakes. You're going to accept potentially a low offer to begin with. We just want to make sure that like you don't put yourself in a huge bind by doing it, but it's okay not to like get this super high salary with your first position. Learn from that interview, negotiate. I've even asked my manager at my first position, like after I was hired, I'm like, I started asking him like, advice for negotiating, etc., stuff like that. And like I learned it from other engineers. I talked to other engineers on the team and how they negotiated. And but yeah, once you get into that industry, it's easier to start getting tons of advice from within that industry to improve all of these skills as well.
Yeah, it's okay if you don't hit your dream salary from your first job, because you can build into that. You can build up a year of experience and get that salary.
Yeah, the ability to walk away is where you get your leverage. 100% agree, Jeremy. And that's what you get as a software engineer that already has a software engineering position that has a year of experience. You definitely get that ability to walk away more. That's how, I don't think I got that ability until my third position. That's why I was able to bump my salary up like 28% from their initial offer. Like it was pretty huge. It's because I was willing to walk away. And Jeremy, you're 100% right. Yeah, really gives you a lot of leverage. Okay, so actually, you want to take a look at chat? And okay, so we are an hour in. Do you have to go, or are you able to stick around for a little bit longer?
I can stick around for a little bit longer.
Okay, because sometimes I'll go like the full hour and a half, but you let me know when you have to go.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a lot of good advice, so I'll keep you as long as I can. All right. Okay, yeah. What question would you like to answer in chat?
Let me take a peek.
And everyone in chat, I'll be doing another live Q&A on Friday, 1:30 Central Time, where I kind of just like really dive through a lot of these questions quickly. But I like this in-depth, a lot of these in-depth responses.
Ooh, I see a question that builds on the last one about what about offers that are on the Uber low end? So building off that, like of course it comes down to living expenses, but it comes down to both how do you feel the offer compares to what you're going to be getting in a couple weeks or a couple months? Do you think you're going to be getting an amount of experience that's worth offsetting whatever you're accepting? And it's also, I think, another thing that we haven't touched on is how do you feel your quality of life is going to be at that new company? What do you feel the benefits are, and are those worth it? Like, do you think that they're going to be taking like 60 hours of your week in order to pay you that salary? Then that's not worth it, because you're not going to have time to look for your next position. You're not going to have time to build into whatever role you're going to build into. But if it seems like a more laid back role where maybe it's going to, you get the unlimited time off and then you get a lot of flexibility with what it is you're going to do, maybe it's okay accepting that lower salary. So even though it's a number, there's a lot of factors that go into that number. And if you feel that it's something you're comfortable taking and it's something that you can, is going to allow you to live and grow into that next position, then I think there's nothing wrong with that. But because your next position can be your dream position, there's no rush if you can get the next month.
Yeah. Work-life balance it's been taken much more seriously over the past couple of years, and it's really been highlighted, which I love. I've always been a huge advocate of it, and I've flat out told employers, that is one of my number one priorities. I want to go home. I want to work on my own projects. I want to, I want to have a life. I don't want to, what's the saying? Work to live, don't live to work. And that's huge. Like, it really is. And you might even be able to get a much higher salary by being willing to put in those extra hours. But that's a balance you have to strike later down the road. But for that first position, especially if it's kind of a little bit of a low ball offer, you're eventually going to be interviewing for companies, and you want that freedom to be able to do so and not be exhausted. And there are a lot of other benefits you need to consider with the position. I remember getting it was the first time in my life that I got at least 2 weeks off. I total with sick days, I think I had 3 weeks off, which is incredible because at my previous company, if I just took off, I was screwed. I just had to make up for it somehow. I was like, okay, well, that's not very healthy. And I ended up getting very stressed out. But I'm glad you touched on that. That's really important to consider.
Yeah.
I want you to pick out a couple of the questions, whatever you feel like answering, since we have you here.
I lost it because I was trying to scroll up and then something bugged out on me. But I saw someone
Wait. Say that again.
I tried to scroll up and something bugged out on me.
The chat bugged out, right?
Yeah. What it did was I was scrolling. It was jumping me down at the bottom. Just looking.
Thank you. I was complaining about it, and there was someone in chat that just blame me for just losing my point. I swear that is an actual issue with YouTube chat. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it happened to me. I don't know what I did, but you're not insane. Or if you are, we're both insane. So. Okay. I saw a question in chat relating to someone was asking they have some degrees in other fields. Does that buff up the resume, or does that does that help them get that first position? And I think that gives us an opportunity to talk larger about, or to talk more in depth about how does previous experience factor into getting that first position. I think the really nice thing that a lot of people underplay is that even though development is very, very code-based, it's a very general field. There's a lot of skills that you build up outside of just being a developer that factor into making you a better developer. And a big part of that is, again, product knowledge, just being able to look at your product from a different point of view and to bring a different insight into it, which is something that a lot of your previous experience might help you do. Or also just some soft skills or even sometimes hard skills that you might have developed in other fields that would cross over. Like me, for example, I started out my career I went to art school and I was a graphic designer. So there was a very natural crossover there because I was already thinking about design knowledge a bit and thinking about, how do we build websites and how do we make websites look pretty and what does it mean to have good UI? So there was some nice crossover there. But even outside of that, I've seen people who start out as my company right now has a preference to hire teachers for two reasons. One, our company makes a tool that's very focused and geared towards helping teachers live better lives and teach better classes. But two, also teachers tend to be very, very good at helping people grow. They tend to be very good at telling people, this is at communicating ideas and also getting across hey, if I'm going to write documentation or if I'm going to onboard somebody else, here's how I can help them become the best version of the developer they're going to be. So which is to say, if you have experience in a different field, that will most definitely help you get that first position. It might not stand out a ton on the resume compared to, having having really well thought out projects and really good projects, but it will help you in the interview process because it gives you something different. Again, it gives you something to stand out. It gives you something to differentiate yourself from anyone else who's applying there. You're unique. You're a special little star. So help them see that.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
I like that. I think a lot of people struggle identifying the skills that can carry over.
Yeah.
And I think it helps to talk to a software engineer, a hiring manager about that if you can. But that is something that can truly help you. And I think, like you said it best, it's like, really what you should be focused on are your projects. Projects are king. They're always going to have way more weight than almost anything else. And I think it's important. So for example, like me volunteering at the Crisis Center was because I got a psychology degree and I cared about, it showed in like, I cared about the soft skills. I cared about the interactions, but I also cared about the user and how they react, how they interact and use and feel about an application. And like, I put a lot of time into that, right? So for a front-end developer, I'm still terrible at design, but I really cared a lot about UX. And that, I think, helped me stand out more. And that was a skill that carried over. But I think like also a question a lot of people have is like, they think they need a college degree, even if it's not a CS degree, to like really get noticed. And I want to really emphasize a college degree, graduating from a college can show that you have commitment. It can show that you tackled a challenge and you also kind of learned how to learn and you really tested that quite a bit. Honestly, like when you graduate high school, it's exhausting. Like we've been learning our whole lives, and just to go to this other traditional educational system and complete it, that can show that you have some commitment and follow through. And that's huge. But quite frankly, if then they look at your GitHub and you have a graveyard of unfinished projects, you're kind of defeating the purpose of like showing that you just completed the college as well. You'd be surprised at what that actually tells employers of your follow through. So there are things that can be, I would argue, definitely don't get a college degree just to showcase you completed a degree just to get a software engineering position, but you can use that in your conversation. You can talk about some of the struggles of college. You can talk about some of the activities that you picked up that are extracurricular, and some of the, especially if you led any of them or took initiative in college in any way. I think that's huge. So it's similar, like both with college and your previous degrees, you can definitely start aligning that with becoming a software engineer. But even with all that said, I still think it's like maybe 10% of your resume that you're going to align that with. Like it really still is focused on your projects. And sometimes it'll come up in the interview and you can dive into it more.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely not a deal breaker if you don't have one. I didn't complete my degree, so I went in as a bootcamp grad and managed to find a role. But if you do have one, that's experience. That's something that sets you apart from other candidates. So use that. Don't hide it, and don't shy away from like, oh, I used to be this, and now I'm just a developer, or now I'm trying to become a developer. Once you have those skills, you are a developer, and the type of developer you are is defined by the unique experience that you've had.
I like that. I really like that. I think you're someone that's really good with helping people align their previous experience with becoming a software engineer and helping, those individuals identify those skills, because that's hard to do for a lot of people.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think it is really difficult to do just because, I feel like I might have special insight into it just because I've taught it full stack. I've seen a lot of people make that transition from whatever they were doing before into being developers. So I've seen those threads connect. But without that experience, without having seen that, it's very hard to take a step back and look at that. But ultimately, it's like you said, you just have to connect with the developer to see what is their life like, what challenges do they actually run into, and how does what I've done in the past connect to those challenges? How do those resonate with me?
I like that. I can see where you built that skill up. But I noticed that actually in the mentorship before you even became an instructor.
I learned it watching you.
Okay. Well, thank you. I don't agree with you, but sure. Maybe some blog posts too. No, I'm not saying to get rid of your unfinished projects in GitHub, but at least at the very least, like showcase the projects that are complete. Sometimes you will have unfinished projects. You're just kind of learning. You're trying to reinforce what you're just learning at that time. If like 98% of it is unfinished projects and it's clouding your GitHub, maybe, especially, yeah, if they're like really basic projects where like you were just learning how to, I don't know, do a for each loop. Like, does that really need to be on GitHub as its own project? Probably not. So it depends.
Yeah, this might be something I just tell myself so I can fall asleep at night, because my GitHub is like a graveyard of unfinished projects.
Mine
like
too.
4 or 5 completed ones. But from what I envision is when someone visits your GitHub, they're not actually going through looking at every single project you did. They're just looking at like the first 6 featured ones and maybe clicking through like from top left, right, left, right, left, right. They're just clicking through the first couple, if anything. So as long as you're showcasing the projects you're most proud of, and as long as those projects are well made and, you know, up to date as you want them to be, you're probably fine. You don't have to worry about going back and undoing a bunch of stuff. There's also like that slight insecurity around like the GitHub color graph, the heat graph of like how many times you've committed. And it's nice having green var that's coming from like random throwaway projects.
Yeah, people do look at that. They do.
Yeah.
The film projector in the background is awesome. That's from Hologram.
Oh, thank you. It's a little wooden film projector I made when I was bored. Ordered it off Amazon, and now I keep it up because I feel like it gets me extra points because I'm working at a video editing company. So
that's smart. I like that. Maybe put it up on a shelf or something where people can see it.
Then I gotta put up a shelf, and that's work.
Okay,
I got that,
enough.
and then I got like all this stuff on the whiteboard back here to make me look smart. Scribbles.
Well, you started out with like a blurred background, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
I'm glad you switched.
I switched. Mm-hmm. I want to show off my projector.
Well, it worked.
Mm-hmm.
How much should I study vanilla JS before starting learning, for example, React?
That's a good question. I would say it's a very difficult question to answer, because the nice thing about studying vanilla JS is the deeper you go into it, the easier everything else is going to be, because everything else comes back around to JavaScript. When you're adding in React, you're sort of just adding in a new flavor, but most of it's still going to be a mix of JavaScript and JSX, or this language that represents HTML. So I don't think any time you're pouring into learning just base JavaScript is wasted if you choose to do a deep dive into vanilla JavaScript. I would say the transition is probably a lot sooner than most people would expect it to be, though, purely because I would say the goal that you want to walk away from working on those skills is that, like, can I create a project out of this? And if you want to create a front-end project and React would help you in creating that front-end project, it might be worth just like picking up enough React to supplement your regular JavaScript to start working on those projects, just so you can have a website that's workable. Another thing that I've noticed is, as React has moved over from the older ways to the new age React, where you're working a lot with hooks and use state and all that, it's become a lot easier to pick up. Once you have a good understanding of JSX and you can use hooks, or you just like know what use state and use effect do, you're very set to work with React. And from there, it just becomes a bunch of JavaScript that you're jumbling together to solve whatever problem you're trying to solve. So I guess to paraphrase that answer, I think that transition can be made a lot sooner than I would have expected it to be made like 2 years ago. If you choose to use it, I think that the best time to transition is when you find it useful. If you find that you're going to work on a project or you want to work on a project that's very website based, then pick up React so you can take your JavaScript and put it into the web, or use it to manipulate the web if that's an ability that you don't have already.
That's an interesting observation, that you feel like people aren't struggling to pick up React as much now that it is focused on function-based components.
Yeah. The thing that's making me feel that way is, for anyone who hasn't touched React before, you used to need to know exactly how React worked, or exactly what the lifecycle of React was in order to work with it. In terms of, you had like 20 different functions. A lot of them sat in different parts of this like lifecycle of when data would enter into your application. And you have to be very familiar with how that worked in order to debug it. Now that we're using hooks, it's been abstracted away for you, so that all you really need to do is know that like this data is changing. The update cycle is a lot less, it's eventually going to be important for you, but starting out it's a lot less important than it used to be, because you can get your code working in a way that makes sense without being too familiar with it.
I like that. Eventually it's going to be important, but you can get started a lot quicker with some of that obscured.
Right, because another odd thing to consider as an entry-level developer is that you don't have to know everything about everything when you're starting out. If you can get a working knowledge of how to work inside of React, that's going to get you to a point where you can start working on projects. And the rest of your knowledge is going to come from you working on projects. Because you can spend all day reading code and going through tutorials, but if you don't put yourself in a position where you have a question that needs to be answered, you're never going to learn what code answers what questions. You're never going to make those mental connections of, hey, if I'm faced with the problem of creating a button that when clicked puts 5 elements on the page and then flips them around in a random order. If you don't have the language of like how to break that into pseudocode and how to solve those little pieces of that puzzle, then you're not really growing as much as you could be. You're just sort of learning what exists, and you're holding on to that. Or in other words, there's a difference between memorizing code and building up the skill of writing code.
I like that. It's really good advice. Definitely getting some good comments from chat too. People appreciate this.
Good to hear.
Thomason, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, even just being here in live chat helps support. Even if you don't type in chat. So I do appreciate everyone that just hangs out. I noticed it's kind of cool. It's a weird, I guess I'm going to talk about myself and be selfish for a second. It's a weird phenomenon of like, I'm starting to get these one-on-ones where it's kind of silly. It's really silly, but like people get nervous talking to me. And I think like people put like YouTubers on a pedestal and stuff like that. I'm like, and like the first 5 minutes is just like, stop that. It's okay. Let's dive into it. I want to get to know you. But like, it's also kind of cool because they'll share stories about like listening to even just like these live streams in the background. Like I just talked to someone who, I'm not going to say where she worked, but she like literally would just put this in the background and listen to the live streams and stuff like that. It's really cool to see like podcasts grow and stuff like that. And then just see like all the different countries that it's listened to. Like our conversation alone, we did a live chat a long time ago. Our conversation alone was spread out throughout the entire world. Like there were people that mentioned that conversation outside of the United States that would literally just like share that they were glad I brought you on, and they kind of just listened to me while they were like doing a factory job and they were on the line, and they just listened to it in the background and stuff like that. So it's kind of like painting a picture of like everyone that does like watch live streams and watch some of the videos. But I guess I just want to say thanks for sharing stuff like that. Like when you share like where you're from and kind of, where you're working or where you even listen to the podcast, the live streams, it's, I don't know, I kind of learn about, there are a lot of unique backgrounds and different people I like learning about. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but it was it was just a weird feeling I had about it that like, man, people are actually listening to like what you and I are saying and taking it seriously. And like, I guarantee you people are like, this will change the trajectory of like what people do with their day-to-day of trying to become a developer. I have no like root message behind that, but I just want to share that.
No, I think it's really neat too. And like the ever nice thing about saying those types of messages pop up in chat where people are talking about like what they do and where they come from is it further digs into the point that there's not one kind of person who becomes a developer. People from all different types of backgrounds make this journey and make this transition very successfully. And it's really nice to see that, it's never too late. It's never lost on you. If you can build up that skill and you can make that transition, or if you can build up that skill, then you can make that transition. It's just a matter of putting in the time and putting in, the work you need to build up.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. That's it's a really accessible career path. It's very hard. There's so much information out there. There's so much information. There was so much, like 7 years ago when I was becoming a developer, I definitely got lost many times, and now like educational programs continue to pop up and you get tons of advice. And now that's the thing. It's like now a lot of people, all the devices, like all the mics, stuff like that, they all got bought out. And like everyone wanted to become a streamer, a content creator. I was having so much trouble upgrading all my equipment because everyone was just like buying everything out. So now you get a bunch of developers that have become content creators giving out that advice. It's I can understand why it gets so confusing.
Yeah, it was. I very much felt that early on in my career. I remember back at Jellyvision, I had another mentor who's just like incredibly smart, and I raised that question to him of like, hey, there's like a million things that I want to do and that I want to learn, but I don't really know what to do because I want to learn it all, but I have to learn it all, or like I want to learn it all, but I only have so much time. He helped me understand that like that feeling of option paralysis where there's just like 1,000 different avenues you can take when learning how to program and when looking for information and trying to figure out which one to pick is hard to navigate as a developer just because there's a lot of stuff you can do. Ultimately, the best thing you can do is just pick something, learn it, do what you can with that information, and make use of it. If it was a bad experience, if you like say picked up Angular and you're like, hey, I don't really like working with Angular, this is very uncomfortable, or this is very awkward to deal with, then at least now you know that. And if you go into an interview and they ask you, hey, why did you choose to use React for this project? You can go ahead and say, well, I tried to use Angular before and I didn't like it for XYZ reason, which made me appreciate XYZ about React a lot more, and shows you have that understanding. So another weird thing about learning to program is there's sort of never wasted time. The only wasted time you spend is the time you spend not doing anything. So if you just pick a path and you go down it, then at least you have something to talk about. And like on the flip side, developers love to complain. We love to talk about things we don't like. So if you can go to an interview and talk to someone about something they don't like, then you'll make a friend.
Okay. I like that. That's kind of funny. Okay, I got one more question for you. I'll let you go. Yeah, Ben, we agreed to have you on for like an hour, so appreciate you staying on for it's been an hour and a half. So
yeah, no, of course. I appreciate everyone in chat. We're getting a lot of good questions today, and we're helping a lot of people out. So thank you for everyone who's putting thought into what they're asking.
I'll ask at the end where people can reach out to you because I want people to connect with you. But I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What is one of the hardest cases? So you've been an instructor for a while. You don't have to name names, but what is one of the hardest cases of an aspiring developer that just like had so much to improve on? Maybe it was like a really bad attitude that was holding them back. Maybe it was just like bad habits they built up, or just they had a background where they just had zero education and they somehow got dumped into the program and they just like truly struggled. Like what was one of the most difficult cases for you to try to like lift that developer up and like get them moving forward and overcome, some of their problems? Can you think back to that?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever asked that question to anyone, but I think those hard cases, I think people can actually relate to those more.
No, it's a very good question. I'm trying to phrase it in a way where it doesn't feel like I'm singling anyone out.
Sure.
I think the place that I see a lot of people end up shooting themselves in the foot is the idea that, one, the famous imposter syndrome that you deal with both when you're starting out and throughout your development career. It's still something I feel today a lot of times because, like, again, there's so much knowledge out there that it's easy to feel like you don't know enough. But as an extension of that, a lot of people sort of get hung up on when they're not understanding something, they get more hung up on the fact that they're not understanding it than they are like in like how they're learning it. Or another way to phrase that is, it's very easy doubly in development to look at something and go, I don't know what this is, I don't know what it's doing, so I'm going to just like throw up my hands and walk away from it. Because the weird thing about development, the really bizarre thing about learning how to code, is that it doesn't happen, it's not a linear experience. You don't gradually build up a lot of that knowledge. A lot of times you run into like these sort of aha moments where you'll start learning something, you'll read about something, you'll try to work on something, and you'll keep pecking at something until suddenly all the thoughts that you needed click into place, and you know what it is you need to do. But the hard thing about that is, until those thoughts click into place, it's very anxiety inducing, because you're sitting there, you're questioning like, am I actually able to do this? Can I get past this hump? Or like, am I just like not smart enough to be a developer? I see a lot of people get stuck in that hump, and I see that discourage a lot of people from actually working on their development skills and becoming a developer. The best advice I can give is, if you ever feel that frustration, one, know that it's not you, it's just development is hard in general, and it's just the way that learning it works. You know, it's the pieces just have to click into place. So you just have to keep pecking at it until it clicks into place. And two, if you're feeling that frustration, it's okay to step away. It's okay to say, hey, I don't understand something. I'm going to take a step back, reabsorb myself, recompose myself, and tackle this in a new way in a couple minutes, or whenever I feel I'm ready to approach it again. Development's not easy. There's a lot of pitfalls to it, and one of the big pitfalls is like things just sometimes don't click into place, and it's hard to memorize those, but you just got to give it time. It'll come eventually. At Full Stack, we like to reiterate a lot that you got to trust the process, and if you trust it enough, usually you'll end up there. You just gotta stick with it and keep your head up.
I like that. I think it really tests how people feel about themselves, the confidence they have, and just being able to overcome different adversities in life. And like coding, it's just a very long journey that tests all of that constantly, right? And I think when a lot of that comes up, and it will come up, you'll have frustrations, you'll feel doubt, you'll feel like you're stupid, an idiot, or just like you're not good enough, or you're not going to get hired over all these other people, or you're I don't know, for whatever reason, you're just not going to fit into this industry, you hate it, etc. Like, you're going to go through so many damn emotions, because this career path, it truly tests a lot of that, and it challenges it to your core, because it takes so long to get through it too. And like, it's not a linear path, and like 6 months, 8 months down the road, you might literally feel those emotions again. It's not like you just like completely obliterate them. You're like, I am never going to feel sad about coding or frustrated with myself ever again. It's like, no, you're definitely going to feel it again. And I honestly feel like it, I don't know. I don't think this is a cheesy thing to say, but I honestly feel like finishing this journey, at least, let me say this for me, at least finishing the journey has helped, because it made me go through a lot of those emotions, but finishing the journey helped me finally feel confident and proud of myself and accomplishing that and overcoming some of those emotions. And I feel like with old industries, I never truly tackled those feelings. I never truly tackled those insecurities. And like with software engineering, it's a long journey. It's not linear. It's going to bring all those emotions and insecurities up and bad habits. And I think one of the best things that you can do is understand they're going to come up, and it might be time to deal with some of that.
Yeah. I think you hit it right on the head there, because the programming itself in general is a very awkward experience in terms of, one, it's a very vulnerable experience, because it might not look like it, but it's an art form at the end of the day. You're taking a creative practice of taking nothing and turning it into something. And you're gonna need to take a critical eye at that, or you're gonna have other people who come up to it and look at it and go, wow, what you made isn't optimal, it's not good, or like it could be done XYZ ways. You have to be ready to both like defend yourself and know that making mistakes like that is okay. It's all part of like the learning process and growing with it. And two, the computer doesn't help you build up that confidence, because like my jokey response when anyone asks what it's like as being a developer is that you just spend all day trying to get a monkey to do something while it's constantly screaming at you. The compiler's just gonna be red 80% of the time you're working with it. And things working out perfectly the first time you do them is a rarity. So you have to be ready to face rejection. And at the end of the day, the journey of becoming a developer is a story of vigilance. It's just, can you work past those awkward humps? Can you get over them, and can you eventually become the developer by just weathering the storm and going through all of those awkward PRs where you're getting weird feedback? Or can you go through like all of your old code and be like, hey, this is bad, but that's okay that it's bad. That's just me learning, and like this is an opportunity for me to grow as a developer.
I like that. I think that's a solid message to end with. That is really good. Ben, I really appreciate you coming on. Seriously, I always appreciate your advice. I knew it would be good. Everyone, thank you so much for the questions in chat, and kind of just, I've been reading a lot of the reactions, but usually when I bring someone else on, I don't read out loud a lot of the chat, but a lot of cozy conversation. I like this conversation. No one I had a ban or anything is pretty cozy. But anyways, yeah. So before you head out, if people want to reach out to you, where could they reach you, or anything else you want to shout out?
Yeah. If anyone wants to talk about what the journey is like becoming a developer, if anyone has questions about what the experience is like on the full stack, or if anyone just like, generally wants to talk about code stuff, always happy to nerd out. Feel free to reach out to my LinkedIn. I think you can toss that in the description.
Yeah, I could do that.
Okay, cool. Feel free to reach out to me there. Always happy to talk.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thank you so much. I know we went over a little bit, but this is super helpful, and I'll put your link in the description. But yeah, thanks, Ben.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. I always appreciate what you do for the community. So it's always a good time coming on.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, have a good one. Have a good rest of your week, and happy coding.
Yeah, you too. Bye, chat.
Say bye to Ben. That was a cozy conversation. Ben carried that. I'm not saying bye, but I'm just saying say bye to Ben. We'll chill for another 10 minutes or so. So what do you think? What do you think of Ben? What do you think about some of his responses? I always feel bad when I end the stream too early, and then everyone I forget about the long delay of responses. Everyone's saying like thank you and bye. I'm like, oh. Yeah, he started out as a test engineer. He, like you said, QA analyst and test engineer. Then he got official software engineering position. And during the time that he was a test engineer and QA analyst, I remember I brought him into my mentorship meetup in Chicago, where we'd usually have like 10 to 20 people hop in, and literally at any point in their journey, I had a few mentors. We just go around the room and like tackle what they're stuck on. Essentially what I'm doing with the QA. Like I've literally been doing this way before YouTube as well. It's just fun. It's fun to I have so much fun diving into, and that's a hard thing. It's like sometimes like you get meetups where you're just doing lectures and you kind of set up those lectures, but like to do a mentorship focused meetup where like we'll literally spend like 15 minutes to 30 minutes like diving into a conversation, like really figuring out where they're stuck, and then come up with a solution right there and then. It's hard, it's difficult, challenging, but that's what Ben did. That's what my other mentors did as well. And it's incredibly fun to do that. Built a lot of strong connections in Chicago doing that. But yeah, he's a phenomenal mentor. He's a instructor at Full Stack Academy, really good software engineer. So at one point I encouraged him to like create content, but I don't know if he ever will. Great chat, good chat for sure. Hey, Noxel. Jeremy, it took you 5 years to become a developer. It can take a long time. I think people that go to coding bootcamps should expect about a year, at least a year. even with what they would consider a top coding boot camp, I don't give a crap what they advertise. I would have your finances ready for at least a year. Self-taught, at least 2 years, could go up to 3 years. I think setting unrealistic expectations for yourself is a world of hurt, especially when you've only financially planned for those unrealistic expectations. I think that's what hurts a lot of people. I really think there's a lot of financial pressure that makes aspiring developers feel stressed out, feel like they're not going to make it, because I hear these other stories of like exceptional developer or people that are exceptional stories that get these positions way faster than everyone else. But it sometimes when you see it in a LinkedIn post, everyone's liking it. You might think, well, this is actually a little bit more common, but it's not. It's not. People getting a position within 3 months, a position within 6 months, it's much rarer than you realize. Thanks, Ben and Don. Glad I came across this. Thompson, I appreciate you just joining us and hanging out. Ben, good job. Bye, guys. Have a killer rest of your weekend. See y'all on Friday. Yeah, we are going to do another live Q&A on Friday as well. Arvin, what boot camps do you recommend? I don't recommend any boot camps. Watch my video. It's an in-depth guide on how to choose a coding boot camp. It's actually a pretty recent live stream. Watch that all the way through. I need to start building out commands in Nightbot where like a lot of common questions that I just repeat myself. I know a lot of Twitch streamers do it. I need to start doing that. I could just like link to videos, things that have been answered already. Sometimes I'll dive back into it, but sometimes I think people like need a really long explanation. In some videos, I do a fairly good job at explaining it. I might set some of those up. Oka and Chai popular for unit testing. They're fairly popular. I have a preference for Mocha and Chai in the back end. I'm a big fan of that. What is the realistic expectation of salaries about junior developer jobs? I saw that you're from Pakistan, Mohammed. You're going to have to look there. But ultimately, like it can range in the United States from city to city. It just depends. Thanks for another great stream. I'm happy I finally made it to one live. I'm happy you made it as well, Karziz. I'm sorry for all the general questions. No, you're good. No, I want to state, I don't think it's a bad thing that you asked that. But okay, well, that question in particular, it's like that I've kind of like teased about that question a bit. It's a more in-depth question. So, but I think it would just like help, rather than me just repeating a lot. I should create commands. Anyways, with a top coding bootcamp, there's no top coding bootcamp. Don't trust top lists. A lot of them are paid. Most of them are paid. Almost all of them are paid. All of them are paid, probably. You should have the mindset that all of those top lists, they have partnerships with the coding bootcamps, or the coding bootcamps paid to get in, or are bringing them money in some way. So don't ever trust the top list. I truly think every coding bootcamp is better for each individual, depending on like what you choose. Each coding bootcamp is unique for each individual. And I think the challenge is finding out which coding bootcamp is right for you. And I think the video that I did mention, I went into depth with that one. And you kind of just have to know what to prioritize based on your situation. Oh, man. You're awesome as always, and Ben delivered. He did deliver, and thank you. How much HTML, CSS should I know before getting to Java? It depends on what you want to build. HTML and CSS is front end, Java is back end. Where can I find coding meetups in Chicago? Well, so I closed down my meetup in Chicago. Chicago is probably locked down forever. I don't agree with how that city's being managed. I've been vocal about that many, many times. I've given up on Chicago. A lot of meetups are usually online in Chicago. Not really any in-person ones anymore. Maybe you look out and find one. I don't know. But you can go to meetup.com, Eventbrite. You can go to different Discord servers that might host hackathons and different events. Like, try to find online communities, online Slack and Discord communities. But yeah, I don't know any specific coding meetups anymore. I know a lot of meetups kind of just dropped off once the pandemic hit. I'm sure the meetup site has taken a hit, but yeah, you're probably going to look for more online communities now, at least in that area. You want to be a front-end dev, so why are you learning Java? Rewatch this. We talked about should you learn backend as well. Talked about, like, does learning backend as a front-end developer make you more marketable, etc. I think that's where Ben and I might have disagreed on a bit. I thought he had really good advice for it, but I guess he did focus on, like, testing architecture was a higher priority, which I agreed with. Yeah, so I don't know why you're learning Java if you want to be a front-end developer. Found your podcast with a gray hoodie cover photo subbed. Awesome. My podcast is growing. I get like I get like 100 listens each episode. I think like 3 months ago I was only getting like within the first 24 hours. I have an episode coming to about like 1,000 listens just for that episode, which is kind of crazy. The audio podcast itself is growing. Maybe I put a sponsor on the audio podcast that would help bring in money and help me do this full time. I don't know why I have such an issue bringing on sponsors for my video. I've had sponsors reach out, but most of them are, I just had a recent one reach out. I probably get one once a week, but a lot of them are like education. And then like, they're not really good educational programs either. But they would pay a lot of money. I can't do it. I can't pull the trigger on that. I live in Chicago, dude. Kind of sad. Yeah, I was a developer in Chicago. I lived there for a few years and I loved it. I truly did. I've always lived by Chicago. You know, I've went in and out of the city multiple times. Welcome, Kings. It is sad what's happening with that. Everyone, the podcast is Don, the Developer Podcast. I appreciate that. Some people, see, I listen to YouTube videos in the background. I just do. I probably should be listening to like where they would have an audio podcast. I don't know why I listen to YouTube in the background. But I do think a lot of people listen to audio podcasts in the background. It's easy. My podcast is even on like Alexa or any other smart device app or device. Smart device. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I'm tired. But yeah, a lot of those home devices, my podcast is on. I figured out people are listening to my podcast. It's just weird. I came into this like, I don't know. I was kind of like trying to share the feeling I recently felt, but like, even though like I get like, I average maybe about 1,000 views per video, some less, some more. It still feels like, I don't know, not a lot of people like watch or listen to me. But then when I hear about those individual stories of like people putting on the podcast or YouTube in the background, I've had companies put on my live streams in the background. And I'm like, damn, like what? I it's like, maybe it's an imposter syndrome as a content creator. I'm like, why? I always get this feeling like, why would people want to listen or watch me? Like, what makes me special versus other content creators? I mean, this is a good example of like imposter syndrome will carry over with you no matter what you do. It's a weird feeling. You just have to deal with it well. Hell, I'm an imposter with building up a business. I've definitely felt that quite a bit as well. Yeah, we're still just hanging out, Hologram. Still just hanging out. Don't I need to know React? If you're getting a front-end position, especially in Chicago, yes. Eventually, you will want to learn it. Heard anything about the tech scene in Alaska, Anchorage? No. But if you have, let us know. I have a weird I have a weird dream of eventually moving to Alaska. Yeah. I don't know if I ever will, but it seems like it would be so peaceful. And if I moved to Alaska, would I still be a content creator? Probably. But I think like the idea is to like really minimize the technology, to enjoy nature a bit more. I don't know. I need to take a vacation to Alaska. Like no one takes a vacation to Alaska, but I want to. That's not a Java framework? No, it is not. It is a JavaScript framework. Java and JavaScript are very different, Arvind. Java is more for the back end. JavaScript can be for the back end, but typically for the front end. Yeah, Java, that's a misconception. JavaScript is not the same thing as Java. Completely different languages. These are amazing. Glad to hear it. Didn't you say in your other video, I'm just going to kind of cherry pick a few questions before we head out, but we will do another live Q&A on Friday. Didn't you say in your other video about low code that front-end developers should start learning JavaScript? Do you still agree with that? Yes. Yeah, any front-end developer absolutely should learn JavaScript. 100% agree with that. Odin Project's a pretty good free resource to start with. You listen to my streams while you code sometimes. That's pretty cool. Provide a ton of value. Glad to hear that. The quality and honesty of your contents is really eye-opening. My live streams, so when I'm tired, I don't have hot takes, usually. I'm pretty tired today. That's why we have chill music. You can tell what kind of stream it's going to be based on the music. Lo-fi, I'm tired. If I'm pumped up, it's synthwave. During my synthwave streams, I definitely go off on a lot of rants. And it's interesting because there was a live stream recently where I immediately lost 5 subscribers during that live stream. Immediately. And then I gained them all back and then some. I think as I get more candid, I think people are going to unsubscribe. And I'm completely fine with that. And I find that I'm gaining new subscribers that appreciate that candidness. It's an interesting thing. I used to like let those superficial statistics like really affect me. Even if it would like be a positive outcome in the end, be like, man, what did I say to upset those 5 people? And I've definitely changed my mindset over the year of that, where I don't care. And I realize because every content creator, like, I don't know, like if I resonate with you, you're going to subscribe to me. If I don't, you're going to subscribe to someone else. And like, it's when you simplify it like that and understand that's a completely okay thing. I don't know. I feel like I have more freedom to be much more honest and candid. I feel good this year. Like I feel really good about some of the conversations we're going to be having. Alaska right next to Russia. That's kind of scary. I don't think I'd be worried about that. I don't know. That's fair. But yeah, I never thought of that. I don't think I'd be worried about that, personally. Thoughts on cover letters in 2022? Ask that in Friday's stream, or rewatch this stream. I think we touched on that. Took nearly 20 years, but I was finally able to move to my dream location, Western North Carolina and the Smoky Mountains. Ah, oh, good for you, Jeremy. Your connection sucks, though. Get Elon Musk's internet. I always enjoy talking to you, but I can't bring you onto like the web-based recording software. But yeah, seriously, good for you. It's a dream I think a lot of people eventually end up having. Not wrong. Yeah. Watch out for the wolves. That's what I hear in Alaska. Do what you feel like satisfying to you. 100% agree, Mohabed. And I am. I definitely am. I feel good about my live streams. We're going to do a lot more. My goal, it's kind of a superficial goal, but by the end of March, I want to start, kind of want to start doing a lot more energetic streams. And like, my goal is to have my streams peak at about 100 viewers and average about 75 concurrent viewers by the end of March. And I think I can do it. I'm getting ready slowly, probably starting in February, to start pushing out a lot of content on different platforms. I'm even talking to other platforms that have reached out, which is kind of interesting. I think a lot of platforms are poaching YouTube content creators. I'm sure other content creators have gotten that message, but expanding my content onto like alt tech and even just like doing a lot of shorts for TikTok and Instagram Reels. And I might do shorts for this channel, but I want to start expanding quite a bit. I'm hoping Starlink will someday fix that for me. I hope they will too. Huh. That sucks. All right. I think that's it. Arvin, no, I quit my position 2 years ago to do this full time. I still code on the side, but I don't code for a company. We'll find. No. Thomason, I ain't dancing on TikTok. That shit's not happening. I have no interest in that. Okay, that's it. Cool. No, not the live streams. No, they're not going into podcasts. My podcasts are audio podcasts, but the live streams, I'm going to be breaking those up and creating separate clips out of those. All right. We went over a little bit. That's okay. 2-hour live stream. Definitely a chill conversation with Ben. I'll put his LinkedIn in the description, but feel free to reach out to him. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining me. I will be live Friday, 1:30 Central Time. If you haven't already joined our Discord, there should be a Discord link in the description below. And definitely want to shout out people that support me on Twitch, YouTube, Patreon with their subscriptions. Thank you so much. I always appreciate your support. We're actually going to be doing a private video chat among the supporters this January 31st. I think it's going to be at like 3 p.m. Central Time. But yeah, thanks for the support. Thanks for being here. Good luck on all of your projects and happy coding, everyone. Take care.